Okay, everybody, welcome to class number 3. And I hope the screen is good. To be a Jew in the free world, class number 3. Both classes have been really fascinating, but I think this one even more because it's very much a continuum. We talked about Napoleon. That was the beginning of the French Revolution, how kind of in Napoleon's takeover, how it changed Jewish identity. Incidentally, Napoleon, you know, he saw like I was reading a little extra. The French Revolution, the reign of terror, they were like against any religion, and it was just the religion of reason, right? But it was a short-lived and failed regime that right after the French Revolution. Napoleon was a little wiser. He's like, people want to cling to their superstitious religious stuff. Okay, we'll give it to them as long as they have number one allegiance to France and me as emperor. So it's just and then Judaism fit into that framework. Then we talked about last week the American Revolution, and how that was such a unique experiment. And you're welcome to go to on YouTube to see the classes. But today we're going to talk about
I think George Washington seemed to be saying a bit of the same thing. Like, be a Jew,
very different because,
but you still need to be a devoted citizen.
but even the government.
Saying he wasn't there.
No, but the difference is that Napoleon was the allegiance to France and Napoleon as emperor was the highest thing. Religion and God came after that. It was a means or a concession, as long as that's the number one thing. Washington, we said clearly the number one thing is even the government is secondary to God, and the inherent natural rights. I mean, the government doesn't give you the rights. The government is merely giving you these inherent natural rights, aka God-given rights. So the government is even beholden to a power higher than itself. It's a big difference, because of course Washington wanted allegiance and that type of thing, to the government, but at the same time, he's very clearly that the government is merely giving us something beyond government.
Hell, better can we use it Jefferson, for instance? I don't think you'd see the same kind of perspective, but
Okay, I was there giving on Washington, the framers. I can't. I don't know about Jefferson. So now, if you have the handout, we are at page 1 by you, but lesson number 3, which is doing it my way, collapse of the traditional Jewish community structure. And I'm not going to. You can read yourself the intro, but the basic questions we're going to discuss tonight are: what are the pros and cons of a centralized Jewish community with authority over its members? In absence of a strong Jewish communal structure, our responsibilities. And interesting Jewish Jeopardy question: why is no chief rabbi of the United States? Other than the chief rabbi of Israel, of England, South Africa, European, communities. Why did it never happen? Some concept of that in the United States, but
why don't cats follow leader?
Yeah. So I just want to point out before we go into the class, let's just think very simply in Rochester, right? We've been here a long time, relatives, some more than others. And it's very clear that whatever communal structure people remember from 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, that has also crumbled. Even that type of, whatever that was, and we can reminisce about that, but it's getting harder and harder to have people stay connected and belong and commit. The keyword, the fear of commitment to Jewish community structure and what does Jewish community look like. But so it's a very real question, but we're going to the kind of the history of it, and then we can get back at the end. For us in Rochester, how can we apply this to the kind of the community and the change in the community and the commitment phobia, and what do we do with that today? So let's go to um, all right. Anywho's, so before we get to some history, let's talk about Jewish law. What does Jewish law say about the how community structure should go, and what can the communal authority, what level of power do they have over the community? So, all right. So let's look text 1A. Did someone volunteer to read?
When a person has lived in the city for 30 days and compelled to give charity to the general fund for the local poor, together with the inhabitants of the city, who dwell there for 6 months, and compelled to contribute to the fund used to clothe the poor of the city. If you dwell there for 9 months, you're compelled to contribute to the fund used to bury the indigent.
So we just quoted Maimonides from his laws of gifts to the poor, Matnot Aniyim. It's the laws of charity and other charitable gifts. And it's very clear, right? There's a level of compulsion that the community administration has over the members, and they have to contribute to certain welfare projects. So we said general funds for the local poor. That was like to feed them. I was like, for food. Then the second, if you're there longer, you have to kick in for the clothing for the poor. And then if you're there longer, then you have to pay for another fund, the burial of the indigent. Okay. Someone read text 1B. Got a person who, so we see now that the authority, the community leaders, community council has powers to extract money for charitable funds. Someone read text 1B. What happens if someone doesn't?
When a person does not want to give charity assessed by the community, or desires to give less than what is appropriate for them, the board should compel him and punish him for rebellious conduct until he gives the amount that was estimated for him to contribute. We take possession of his property when he is present and expropriate the amount he is meant to provide. We seize property for the sake of charity, even on Friday.
Many stores are closed late Friday. The charity collector could still seize property then. So this sounds, who knew that the community Jewish leadership didn't just make an appeal, they can demand and force compliance with the needs the community needs.
Forget the hand.
What? I know. So now this is the whole devious reason for the whole course. Just so you know. Now the truth is, it's a little different than charity, the way we look at it today, because this is the equivalent of a tax, of a local tax. And we're going to learn about how it worked in those days, that most Jewish communities, even post-Israel, post-exile, were self-governed, even though they were under Spain or medieval. The host country said, you guys just give us a tax, a tribute every year, and you self-govern. So then it was left up to the local, leadership, or we'll talk about who that was, to get compliance. But from Jewish law, there is a responsibility for people that can be the responsibility of participation that can be demanded by the leadership, or the Jewish leadership. So let's do a little learning exercise. But actually, before that, there was a middle-aged couple taking a first-class trip to the Far East And the captain gets on and says, Mayday, we're gonna be in trouble. We are gonna have to crash landing. And they end and we're going, and we're going, it's getting really, really bad, but there's some uninhabited island, and that's where we're gonna make a crash landing. I don't know how anybody's gonna find us, but we have no choice. So as they go down, they go to the lifeboats and they get to the uninhabited islands with their fellow passengers, and everybody's freaking out. How are we going to get saved? It's some godforsaken place. So Morris tells Esther, do you ever pay that UGA pledge? Says, no, okay, then they'll find us. Um, okay, so let's do a little learning exercise. In order to meet the needs of your local Jewish community in Rochester, in Pittsburgh, you're saying, would you be in favor of a plan that levies what you consider to be a fair tax on each member of the community? Or do you prefer the contemporary method that relies on private donations given by those who choose to be charitable? I mean, let's say we want to keep it's really a lot of, everybody's wondering what's going to be the future of Rochester. Okay, we have an idea. You're all going to be accountable for X amount of percentage of income a year or whatever, a set amount. Um, that's the way we're going to make Rochester flourish at the time. Or you're going to rely on the rabbi doing raffles and the federation doing appeals and stuff like that. So let's take a minute to talk amongst yourselves of which the pros and cons of mandatory or keep it optional.
Rabbi, why don't you just take a very quick raise of hands of who here would want a tax?
Okay, thank you. Who here, raise their hands, who would want a tax?
There's a whole lot of discussion.
This was a failure. This whole course was, oh man. Okay, I was hoping we could keep it private donations. Yeah. Okay. Why are you so against the tax? You like Jewish community. Why are you against it being mandatory?
Well, we tax a lot.
Think of a time when the synagogue I grew up in, this is when I was in college, the board decided to send every family, you can donate this many thousands of dollars. I remember my parents getting that letter and being like, it was a high number, and they were upset about that. Because they had one or two kids in college, they've got summer camps, a lot of expenses, and it's, they were.
So it didn't work. It just didn't work. It didn't work.
Bad feelings.
How about a combination of the two?
Combination. So maybe like dues, like a base dues with for base, and then we have some fundraising. That's actually an interesting idea. I'm cool with that.
But that's what it was complicated.
Right. It's true. Okay, so let's go to the next section. Okay. We're going to look back at the community, the Jewish community. So that was Jewish law. Now let's talk about how history played out. The Jewish medieval communities for 1,000 years, or in post-medieval. This is text 2A. Someone would like to read. This is from Dr. Jacob Marcus, professor of Jewish history. Yeah.
Today, in our search for adequate forms of organization, it is important to catch some glimpse of civilization that survives and in its own way prospered for over 1,000 years. The task will become increasingly difficult as the days go by, for time and World War II have destroyed much of the vast source of material that lay in the depths and gulf of village cinema and metropolitan archives. Yet the attempt should be made to resurrect a path that had the capacity to keep the Jew alive under the most untoward circumstances. Beneficent control of every phase of life of every Jew within its sphere of influence was the goal of the medieval German Jewish.
Okay. So that's a little academic, but it's, reality is that in medieval German Jewish communities or most of the communities back then, you had to be Jewish and it was totally prescripted, and that was life. Or as Tevye famously summed it up, tradition. Here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything: how to eat, how to sleep, how to wear clothes. Anatevka, fictional story, but it took place before 1881 with the Russian pogroms. But that's the way it was for hundreds, maybe 1,000+ years. So what they're basically both talking about is how the shtetl in medieval Europe and beyond was dictated by internal community councils who collected taxes from the government on behalf on their behalf. This Jewish community council, a mixture of both the rabbi and lay leaders that were influential, rich, or well connected, were empowered. I'm not sure if they were voted in, maybe. I'm not really sure how they got that position, the lay leaders, but they were empowered by the country's rulers who didn't want to deal with local, governance. So they basically gave it to them. You self-govern. And they had the powers to set local taxes, ordinances, and the powers we saw to enforce. I think we talked. If someone didn't, I'm not sure. I don't know the history of all these communities, but one of the big things that was used, the threat, was cherem, threat of excommunication. Excommunication was basically you couldn't survive because you had to be part of a community, and the community is going to banish you. You wouldn't be able to be at shul. You couldn't. I mean, there's many things you wouldn't be allowed to do. And basically, that ban of ostracism was a threat if you would rebel, and it would keep people at bay. So text 3a, which is adapted from a huge Jewish historian, Cecil Roth, sumptuary laws of the community of Carpentras. And I'll read 3a. Carpentras, France.
Seeing the efforts of heads of families to make their living and to earn the wherewithal to pay the taxes and levies that are mandatory for all, seeing moreover, even arises for any religious festivity, to live to celebrate acceptance from wedding, the indulge in expenditure greater than they can afford, so that there is trembling in place of joy as they see the drain of their money, making them limit their household expenditure and their payments for communal taxation, seeing the envy of each man for his neighbor, and not each one endeavors to show his superiority over his neighbor, so that there's no distinction between rich and poor, all desiring to appear men eminence and of wealth, no apparel, in any abundance of their women without being able to sustain the expense. Consequence, wherever they're brought low and growing not impoverished. Therefore, we find it necessary to enact a number of regulations.
So this is one that look, people are, blowing their money on today, now it's blowing your money on whatever, luxury, and then it was blowing it on family simchas. And it got out of hand. So they said, we need to make, and they had that power to set regulation ordinances. So in 3b, this was their solution. I'm just going to summarize it, that following the circumcision, one banquet is permitted. Like not these, I didn't know this. People do like a week of feasting after a bris, one. And even that, no more than 12 guests. That's her bris. A wedding. So the Council of Carpentras, France said the groom may not distribute ribbons, I guess as an expensive adornment. Gold pins and rosettes may only be worn by the officiants. An exception can be made for out-of-town guests and Gentile business acquaintances. So, it sounds like this, council of elders that's like controlling. There's a lot of benefit, right? There's structure. There's people can't decide like I'm going to blow all my money on a wedding or they'd have to they got to keep their local community going. They have to keep their own family going. People are poor of that. But there's also it also helped in a way keep a certain level of not besides the religious part, I think the order part of it, people were told this is what you could do, this is what their expectations were. And think of the benefits of a regulated, imagine if bar mitzvahs, instead of having to feel like I have to do this, and like, imagine that you couldn't spend more than X amount of dollars and everybody did the same, that all the the waste would go away, this is the essentials. Doing this, by the way, in some communities in parts of Israel or in Brooklyn, they do certain Hasidic groups do have ordinances of how much they're allowed to spend. Anyways, but just as a cute little story. So there's a wealthy guy, Max, and he always, looked to one up his business acquaintances. So came time for his son's bar mitzvah, David's bar mitzvah. So he gets a party plan. And he says, "I want it to be something crazy, special." So he says, "What can we do that's like really unique?" He says, "You know what? They come up, we're going to do for your son David a bar mitzvah safari, where he's going to go into the jungle, into uncharted territory, hear, a tribal chant, and and he's going to take a, wear his tefillin next to a sedated lion and read the Torah in some, far out brush area." Okay. So they plan it, they have charter a private jet, all his acquaintance, family and friends, and they go and they have this convoy of jeeps and they're going deep into the jungle. And after they're getting closer to the spot for the bar mitzvah, and they get stuck. And the local guide says, "We can't go for another 2 hours." Max, what are you crazy? I spent all this money and now you're telling us delay. He says, "Nothing I can do. There's 2 bar mitzvah safaris ahead of us." So, they made a movie, Keeping Up with the Cones, there's a movie about bar mitzvah, like competing bar mitzvahs. I think they made like a Keep with the Cones or anyways. So let's do about learning exercise 2. Do you feel that your local Jewish community, whoever that community is, the community leaders, has too much power of authority, too little power of authority, just the right amount of power and authority? Okay, let's raise that. They have too much power and authority. Too little power and authority. Just the right, just the Goldilocks, just right. So you like very little authority. Very, very, very minimal.
I don't think it's generally good.
What do you
I
mean?
think, like, on the story of how you're deal with warranted because of trust of people, very sensitive about it. Good. But
So you don't like saying you can't have a yacht. You can,
Well, I can think of another thing. See if anybody at the table, how they feel about it. Having laws in our ordinances that say you can only gamble so much.
okay,
So
that
that
exists.
if I wanna go, I can go right now, I could go down to the casino and I can gamble away every penny I have.
Right.
Now, we're talking about ordinances here, and it would say, no, you can't do that. I mean, because some of that's gotta go to the community, and that's just, so these are ordinances that control behavior.
Right.
Which in the United States doesn't really cut it too well.
Right. Oh, so that's what we're gonna get to. Like for us, freedom is everything. And we're gonna see this is played out in history.
But the point is not to limit that person. The point is that if he loses all his money, he's gonna blow up the community.
Well, that could be part of it, right? That's actually a good point. It says, people.
Well, it's an excellent point, but I don't know any laws in the country, I don't.
In America,
Say that.
you can't squander your money away. Right. But there is, so you have to understand though, we're talking where, this is, we're trying to, these communities are the Torah has kind of a prescripted, way of life and value system in it. And it's going to be to some degree, like, the freedom that we know, we'll get to America, that's actually what the class is about, but I think what Avi's saying is like the Torah says, like you have certain responsibilities and you have to do responsibilities. We're not going to let you ignore those responsibilities, which back then, particularly, responsibilities equaled survival. It wasn't just like, oh, you could waste your money away at the bris or the wedding, and like no, you'd fall in the community. If everybody do, there'd be people would survive. The community would just collapse. So that's part of it. There's other issues of. There's actually a thing of like, if they would look rich in the eyes of Gentiles, they'd get angry and envious, and then they would like raise taxes or whatnot. So like there was a certain level of survival, I think, in this. I mean, both practical survival and also Jewish way of life perpetuation that was trumped kind of do whatever you want, have freedom. But that's the way it was. This was a,
In my you're saying, sure, yes, pogroms, kills, terrible.
so that's survival.
Right, where and that, but that easily bleeds or blends into someone had, thinking that way, but just having too much regulation, they think that used to.
So the problem is,
Much money,
right, right,
a lot, it's not like you can just get rid of the cheap, I mean,
right.
it can quickly turn into power.
So let's see. So I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
I'm sure, like I'm sure there was, I don't know how they would self-regulate, but yeah. Okay, so let's talk about America. So Jewish authority diminished. So in this text for Lucy Davidowitz, I think it's to pronounce her name, big historian. In most pre-war European states, Jews became members at birth of a legally constituted and officially defined Jewish community having governmental status. A Jew could take his leave from such a community only by submitting a formal petition to the municipality. Upon approval, the petition was then classified as a non-believer. In Poland, where the Ministry of Religion did not recognize non-believers as a category, the only effective way of withdrawing from the community Jewish group was through conversion. But America, as they say, is different. Here, group membership is considered strictly a private matter, and non-identification of the Jewish group involves no communal penalty or public sanction, since it requires no public declaration of disaffiliation, as in Weimar, Germany. For instance, where the local Jewish communities informed by the municipality of Jewish withdrawals used to publish notices in the newspapers under the heading Austritt aus dem Judentum, official withdrawals from Judaism. So what we get from this reading is that, number one, this was sanctioned by the power of the host country's government. That's kind of where the power for the local community came from. And two, to walk away was it took an official, procedure or conversion. So let's contrast that with America. Oh, not there. Sorry, we'll get to that. All right, text number 5. Someone want to read? Loud if you're going to do it. Upping the stakes.
Jews in post-revolutionary America made their own rules concerning how to live Jewishly. The freedom that produced is anyone can do what he wants attitude reinforces perfectly and true ritual practice that we know already exists in the world. Historian Jacob Reeder Marcus, who spent half of his long career studying early American Jews, persuasively argued that a spectrum of Jews existed in America at this time, stretching from the utterly devoted to the complete defector. He concluded that there were almost as many Judaisms as there were in matters of religious practice, as in so many other aspects of life during the early Republic. Individual freedom reigned supreme, setting a pattern of American Jewish faith.
So this is going to be a little summary, but if you're very interested to know more, in the back of page 118, Freedom Change Jewish Communities, additional reading, very good. But essentially, America was the idea of freedom in pre-revolution, and for sure after, was so that rugged individualism, that freedom was so important and so baked into the American spirit that, that easily, quickly became the way Jews can now. No one can tell me how to be Jewish. They can choose whatever type of Judaism or how much they want to opt in or opt out they want, which was known in Europe. Now, still, here's the thing: many of the Jews did want to belong to a community. So this is what you call the synagogue community model. By establishing only one synagogue within each city, they say, look, yeah, from the government, we no longer have power to sanction people for flouting the Jewish community, norms. But by choice. If you want to belong to the synagogue of this town, you have to agree to certain membership rules, and at least there's some level of authority from the synagogue. An example would be in text number 6. The oldest synagogue is on the left, Congregation Mikveh Israel. Here are some examples of rules that were enforced in Philadelphia's sole synagogue, Mikveh Israel, around 1770. Every household is obligated to do that which is right, to submit to any orders of the president of the synagogue. Every temple president is treated. It is known that a person has desecrated the Shabbos. That person has no right to receive religious courtesy in the synagogue, no aliyah, until he hears what his sentence will be. Number 3, if the president accords religious courtesy to anybody in the synagogue, that person is obligated to accept and make an appropriate donation. If not, he has to pay a fine. If a person has a religious obligation to fill at a morning service, he is obligated likewise to come to the afternoon service. If not, I guess people would come to Kaddish in the morning and then they would skip Mincha. We're not, no, you're gonna have to pay a fine. Okay, we need a minion for Mincha, you're coming. Okay, but that did not work out. We're gonna see in text number 7, in the free world, if you didn't like the synagogue that existed, you could just start a new one. And that's what they did in Philadelphia. Rodef Shalom congregation. The problem that Jews grappled within the decades that followed the revolution was whether Judaism as they knew it could be reconciled with freedom and democracy. Could the traditional synagogue community structure that bound Jews together promote a group survival, also accommodate new political and cultural realities, meaning with all the freedom to do what you want? As the 19th century dawned, the synagogue community and the liberal spirit of the age stood in a collision course. In Charles, Philadelphia, the synagogue community model, with one synagogue in each community that claimed overarching authority in Jewish life, had been challenged even before 1800. Communal divisions in Charleston ran along traditional Old World lines, Sephardim in one, Ashkenaz in the other, one synagogue in Ashkenaz in the other. But by 1791, in keeping with the American practice of having one congregation shared by all Jews in the community, the two had effected a somewhat easy reconciliation. Centralized authority was restored in Charleston. So we got Sephardim and Ashkenaz, but they made some agreement of membership norms. By contrast, Philadelphia, where the Jewish community had fallen to fewer than 50 people, they developed in 1802 a separate German shul named Rodef Shalom, Pursuit of Peace. Philadelphia's Revolutionary era synagogue, Mikveh Israel, small, impoverished, and internally divided at the time, had already forfeited most of its authority. Perhaps appropriately, Philadelphia, the city where American freedom first took root, was also the city where the monolithic synagogue community first withered away. The fact that the second synagogue, like the short-lived Charleston one, contained the word shalom in its name is also revealing. The scaled-down hope of 19th century synagogues faced with unprecedented challenges to authority was something to pursue communal peace. So it's interesting that the name shalom was a lot of fighting. We should have shalom. It's a lot of, shalom in the synagogue names. Okay. So this is text 8, Jeffrey Gurak, also a Jewish history professor at Yeshiva University. Although early American rabbis preached to anyone who listened to the Jews' obligation to observe the Sabbath, of the necessity to provide children with a comprehensive Jewish education, and the community's responsibility to monitor and to supervise the provision of kosher meat, they lacked the power to coerce the parishioners. In open America, no ecclesiastical power could mandate religious observance. No tithe could be enforced to support institutions, and an unregulated free enterprise system, anybody could open a butcher shop, sprinkle sawdust on the floor, which is what they did in Jewish butchers, paint the words baser kasher, kosher meat, on the window, and declare himself an authorized slaughter and overseer of meat preparation. Indeed, half of the butchers were not kosher, and they said kosher, yeah. Okay, so this is just to paint you a picture of what American freedom, how it upended the whole synagogue or Jewish community council power of creating Jewish norms and demanding support to keep Jewish life going. So it's not a new story. This has happened in the very beginning of American establishment. We're going to watch a video of a story of the attempt to create a chief rabbi. which was trying to right the corruption of. Let's listen.
Life for the Jews of New York began to change in the late 1800s with an influx of immigrants from Russia in numbers that dwarfed those of the existing community.
In the 1880s, the American Jewish population is growing rapidly. Tens of thousands of East European Jews have begun emigrating to the United States following the assassination of Alexander II in Russia and the ensuing pogroms and May laws which so restricted Jews. The Jewish community is growing quickly, and there's great communal disorder in the field of kosher food, for example. There is enormous amount of out-and-out fraud, and all sorts of people are selling food that they claim to be kosher, but that in fact was not kosher. Similarly, there are all sorts of difficulties connected with Jewish marriages, with Jewish divorces, and with issues of Jewish law. And there were those who said what America needs is a chief rabbi, a rabbi who everyone will jointly look up to, a rabbi who will be able to sort out what needs to be done and to impose a series of standards for kosher food and for all matters of Jewish law.
A number of congregations formed the Association of American Orthodox Hebrew Congregations, and each participating synagogue pledged funds to help support the chief rabbi for a period of 5 years. The man that was chosen to be New York's chief rabbi was a respected Torah scholar from Lithuania, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef. He was an authority in rabbinic law and a dynamic and popular preacher who lived up to the name he was given, Charif, meaning sharp or keen-minded.
So Rabbi Yaakov Yosef comes to America, and he is given a warm welcome, and he makes various pronouncements which initially are well received.
All seemed propitious for the chief rabbi when he assumed his office in 1888, but unfortunately the feelings of goodwill would not last long.
Okay. We get to read. Reading is still a necessary part of this. Okay, his major mandate to order to the system of kashrut. Many issues, but that was a big one. He wanted to keep kosher, and it seemed there was fraud. So we're going to read the bottom of page 97. He came to so until the arrival of Rabbi Jacob Joseph in New York, no one had dared tamper with the highly lucrative arrangement of the abattoirs and the butchers, which basically they made their own. They hired anybody. You're my rabbi, and no one, everybody did what they wanted. So to facilitate Joseph's task, the Socio-American Orthodox rabbis proposed a penny tax upon each poultry. It was anticipated the penny tax, a penny back then would be like $3 today or something. It was anticipated that the penny tax and the congregational dues paid to the association would be sufficient to cover the salaries for Rabbi Jacob and his inspectors. So this was a major PR disaster. To many housewives, the tax smacked of price gouging. An equally bitter protest came from the ranks of the butchers and slaughterers. They expressed their discontent by forming their own association with the aim of resisting outsiders and from getting control of the industry. So they said, we're going to hire our own rabbi league, to do. In addition, some rabbis threatened the loss of their income from the abattoirs and the and the butchers, and the resentful of the exalted state and salary conferred on the chief rabbi, joined in agitation against Joseph and the penny tax. They made like jingles mocking him. It was a horrible smear campaign. Rabbi Joseph, despite a small and appreciative following, could not overcome the centrifugal forces in the New York Jewish community. Reduced to shame and parody, his influence gradually declined. The association soon began to renege on payments of Joseph's salary. For all practical purposes, became a mere paper organization. Eventually, the association dissolved in an atmosphere replete with acrimony. But Joseph was left without a source of income and was forced to move his family to a squalid Lower East Side tenement flat. There, disillusioned and ill, he suffered a series of paralyzing strokes. In 1902, at the age of 54, he passed away. The Yiddish newspaper forwarded an editorial on his death stressed that Rabbi Joseph had been a sacrificial offering to business Judaism. It's a very tragic story, but this is when you try to tamper with that free spirit. No one's going to tell me what to do. The bottom line summary of what we learned now is, U.S. Jews tried when they tried to go back to the old world type of imposition, failed miserably. And the truth is, the concept of a chief rabbi, even in Britain today, it's not like it's very limited of its authority. So, okay, so that's kind of where we're holding. We talked what used to be the flourishing shtetls and Jewish communities came partially because there was a lot of central control with America, particularly New World, that all dissolved. And now we have freedom. And we have a challenge. It's on the other hand, so the con of freedom is look at our community, right? People can just opt out and opt out more and more every generation. Okay, so let's talk about. I'm sorry. So let's do let's look at the Torah's view about free choice and how we should understand a free choice society.
Free choice or free will?
So let's go. So let's talk about choice, that you can choose whatever you want in Judaism, right? But in Judaism, is there such a thing as free choice? Do you really have free choice? Think about that. And two, let's say you do have free choice, you have free will. Why would God give it? Only human beings have unique free will over the animal kingdom, compared to the animal kingdom, compared to the vegetarian kingdom. Why do humans have this kind of extra measure of free will, free choice? So, do you think we have free choice?
That's how you define Buddhism.
Not Judaism, free Judaism. Saying, can you go to the Wegmans and you have no external forces guiding your choice when you buy something or you choose where to live. So on one hand, you have no one's forcing you to do anything, right?
Well, it's contextual. Because you don't have free choice to yell fire in a theater. But
If I'm saying
free choice to pick a bottle of peanut butter off the shelf and take it
right.
to the cashier.
So many people claim we don't have free choice. You have genetics, you have societal conditioning, right? Like, yeah, you could pick any peanut butter you want, you could pick any, type of dinner you want, but a lot of it was kind of pre-programmed to you to some degree. So let's take what the Torah looks about,
Those Jews will have a free choice to believe in God or not.
so a lot of things come, do you have free choice whether you're going to eat and drink today? No. Like a lot of things that we do are really to perpetuate our animal soul, our self-perpetuating selfish drive. We just want to exist. Like it sounds silly. We're getting very, very, very deep. But or society. So I want to say the way the Torah looks at free choice. So text 10a quotes from Abraham. Hashem said to Avram, go. We said this earlier. Lech lecha me'artzecha, go from your land, from your birthplace, Beis Avicha, from your father's house, El Eretz Asher, the land I'll show you. Why is the Torah specifying all these leave this? Just go, go. We said earlier, Lech lecha is go to find your true self. Why are you saying go? I mean, go means don't stay. So I get it. Why are you saying leave your land, leave your father's house, leave your birthplace? Why is it delineating so many leaving so much? So this is where text 10b is a fascinating one. I'm going to read it out loud and then we'll summarize it. Fundamental to the Torah are two freedoms, the freedom of God and the freedom of human beings. God is not, in Judaism, an impersonal force. He acts of creation, revelation, redemption, not on the basis of necessity, but of choice. God doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to redeem the Jews, but he chooses to. In choosing to make mankind in his own image, he endowed us too with choice. There's no such thing as fate or predestination. I call heaven and earth to witness, said Moses, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life. It was this that Spinoza, Marx, and Freud set out to challenge. Each thought sought to show that we're not free. Man is a predictable animal. Our nature and character are subject to quasi-scientific laws. There's a science of human behavior that as there's a science of atoms. History, personal or collective, is a form of inevitability. We are what we are because we could not be otherwise. Against this, Judaism is a living protest. Abraham and his children were summoned to live a life of radical freedom, and it's this that is at the heart of God's threefold call. Marx said man is a product of social forces, themselves shaped by the interests of the ruling class, the owners of property. Therefore, God said to Abraham, leave your land. You're not dependent on Marxism. You're not ruled by land or Marxism theory. Spinoza said that man is made by innate instincts and biological drives. Nowadays, this is called genetic determinism. Given by birth. Therefore, God said to Abraham, leave the circumstance of your birth. Freud said that we are the way we are because of the traumas of childhood, the influence of our early years, relationships, rivalries with our parents, especially our father. Therefore, God said to Abram, leave your father's house. Lech lecha means leave behind you all that makes human beings predictable, unfree, able to blame others, and evade responsibility. Abraham's children were summoned to be the people that defied the laws of nature because they refused to define themselves as the product of nature. That is not to say that economic or biological or psychological forces have no part to play in human behavior. They do. With sufficient imagination, determination, discipline, and courage, we can rise above them. Abraham did so most times did his children. Beautiful. So we're saying that yes, it's to summarize, Marx said man is a product of social forces. Torah says, leave your land. Man is made by innate instincts and biological drives. Torah's response, leave the circumstance of your birth. We're largely influenced, Freud said, we're influenced with the traumas of our childhood, relationships with our parents. Genesis, leave your father's house. So the Torah says we might have these drives, this baggage or innate just parts of being a human being that are what they are, but we have the ability to not always give in to them. Sorry, should you fast and have bread and water every day? No, we're not saying you should go against every human desire and need. Typically, the Torah channels human needs and needs and desires. But whenever these needs and desires or come into conflict with your morality, you might say, I have no choice. That's my drive. It says, no, you have the ability to follow your, as we say, the Yetzer Tov, the moral conscience, and to rise above it. Someone to read text 11.
Neither angels nor animals are free to choose and determine their own meaning. Angels are considered God and mysterious order if they're cool, and completely under domination of their. When the animal is thirsty, must seek water, and is hungry to search for food. Another since tradition had an animal properly going. Hungry and thirsty is that struggle. The animals can probably satisfy strong as and incessant stages. Man, however, was intended to be free to shoot and carry with their issues. Ability to be mastered and tribe of one's drives rather than enslaved by them. Yes, this is
To summarize, no free choice animals because they don't go against their instincts. That means they represents not being to overcome one's physical instincts. Angels also can't go over their instincts. They just have spiritual instincts. Okay. So it's not just like going with your instincts equals just like crass, physical indulgence. It also means spiritual go with the flow. The humans have free choice because we're a mixture of animal and angel of spirit. And because of that, we have the ability to this, and I'm sure, of course, Hashem puts it together, which gives the ability to navigate both drives.
You sure about that? There's,
Say
I
what,
mean, there's a lot of science for it. Especially man apes.
they can go against their instinct.
Yeah, just I mean, just because you're a doctor and I'd be the 1930s, that you know all the specific.
I mean, it's not, he's born. He's born in the 1930s. He passed away. I don't know. Look it up. We have to. I don't know if animals can go. I mean, even an ape, it's very intelligent, but it's usually to facilitate their care for their offspring, food, mating. Like, when do they go against? Maybe they're more sophisticated of how they can carry out, like for a lower level animal, the eating and mating and hunt, whatever they do, isn't as sophisticated and maybe not as able to do it in a group like the apes can. But I don't know, can they? Oh, just because they do more complicated stuff, who says it's not instinctual?
This is like what food decisions and
So that's worse.
a lot of science involved building. And then neuroscience have come pretty well and cat and action volition too. So,
What does it say? Tell us what's the. I mean,
I mean, they're all root neuroscience things that can
right,
in the way that's being defined. It's relevant.
right. I guess. Look, I think this is very. What Rabbi Sachs is saying earlier about that we have the ability to override. It doesn't mean everything we do is going to be, selfless and altruistic and deny our instinct. But there's many things in life that it's a question like somebody who can overcome, a temptation, right? Because they think this is the wrong thing to do. And they really, really want, it's interesting. Look, so you could say, well, they're overcoming it for further self-preservation. I know there's like different schools of thought, and don't know them all off my tongue. But I think Judaism believes the soul has the ability to go. Oh, doesn't mean again you always are going against your instinct. But the point is that you are able to go against instinct when it comes to a conflict with morality. Um, of course, the goal ultimately of Judaism is not to override instinct; it's to channel instinct to be in harmony with morality. But I hear you. I'm sure there's very intelligent scientists that might argue and they say, no, even religion, even altruism and real altruism and moral courage can be just predetermined.
I mean, I generally agree with Juan, but I think the idea of, well, animals do or don't, that's kind of a red herring. I mean, we know about us. And yes, we sort of part about how we can say, well, my child, I want my child to starve, I'll refrain from eating. I mean, we know we can do that. I mean, we don't know exactly about dolphins or elephants or whatever, although some neuroscientists have studied it. But we do know a fair amount about humans. Where you said in the Tanya about animal soul and the God soul, godly soul. I mean, we know that. I mean, and that's still an important point here, I think. I mean, I don't know why we have to make this point. I don't know why we have to contrast against animals.
We don't have to, but I mean, he's just giving an example of where
Maybe it sounds good. I don't.
trust helps some degree. He's also contrasting against angels, to be fair. Angels also are pre-programmed animals in a sense. It's actually the vision of Ezekiel was of angels, and some of them were the chariot, and some looked like lion, and some looked like an eagle, and some looked like an ox, and some looked like a human. Whatever. It's all metaphor, but because there's a concept that angels are instinctual in the other extreme, just to like have hallelujah, and connect to God, listen to God, or
We could be certain here if we said some animals. We are sure about some animals. I mean, clearly, like, our house pets, they are very instinctual.
right.
You don't feed them at a certain time.
But this is the big.
That's all it is.
So just to give from the text 12a, someone wants to read famous verse from Deuteronomy from Moses, as before he passed away, he gives the directive to his people. Short one, wants to grab a short one.
Set before you today life and good, and death and evil. I've set before you life and death.
Right? Giving you and on that commentary, Yehuda Lowy, the Maral of Prague, says if God sees that a man wants to sin, he does not stop him from sinning. The power to choose to be given to him. This is because man is created in God's image, and in this he resembles God. The human being created in the image of God has something unique in that he is autonomous. Just as it is in God's power to act as he wants, so too is it in man's hand to do what he wants. He has the power of choice. This is one definition of what being created in the Tselem Elokim. We talked about that story, the Tselem being created in the image of God. In the new Chumash, they give all the commentaries. What's the image of God? So one opinion would say it's the ability of free choice. Okay. Now, we have free choice. That makes human being a human. However, is free choice, you could choose bad. You could choose good, but like there's risk with free choice. What's the risk and what's the benefits? So I'm going to summarize on page 105. This is from a reading of the Baal Shem Tov, founder of the Hasidic movement. And he says, Israel in whom I shall be glorified. God derives much glory, delight, and pleasure from a righteous person's deeds, his Torah and prayer. Our sages state in the Talmud, Kiddushin 30b, God said to Israel, I have created the selfish inclination, aka the Yetzer Hara in Hebrew. I've created the Torah, though, as the antidote. In Hebrew, tavla means the spices, they have in the apothecary, the herbs. That is to say, your love and affection for us is very great. You created the selfish inclination, you created the Torah. Thus, you give us the strength to overcome the selfish inclination and to sweeten it by means of the Torah, just as spices are used in cooking. It follows then that everything comes from you. All that it comes really from you and from your power. Nonetheless, you take great delight in our accomplishments, and you take pride in us as if we've done it by the might of our hands. We're saying, really, God's doing everything, even giving us the ability to choose right. But gives us the credit. Example, it's like a child dearly loved by his father who is visited by a guest who came to test him. Commonly a scholar, rabbi's traveling, he'd stay over somewhere and he'd test the boys. What are you learning in school? The boy had no understanding at all of the legal ruling on what she was to be tested. It was a hard Talmudic passage. Because of its great profundity and subtlety, the father, because of his great affection for his son, could not bear his beloved son's anguish of being confounded and failing the test, the quiz. What did his father do? He provided him with an insight into the ruling, showing him the proper approach to the subject. Basically, it could be very dense, Talmudic rulings. This is the way you read it. This is what it means. This is what. So the father gave him, kind of the Cliff's Notes, so he'd be able to discuss it properly. The father taught him almost the entire substance of the legal ruling. The guest began to test the son in front of his father, and the son started to explain the legal ruling. He gave the Cliff Notes answer his father and he helped him with. The visitor asked him several questions. The son answered appropriately. Demonstrating a clear and brilliant mind, his father was joyful, delighted, and proud seeing this. As the visitor noticed the father's pleasure, though, he wanted to enhance it further. So he asked him additional questions that were not covered in the Cliff's Notes and raised numerous new and complex legal difficulties and nuances of the passage, of this whatever subject matter. The son surprisingly mustered his own wisdom and resolved all of the questions that were asked without his father having given him, prompts or prep for that. Similarly, God is the one who motivates us and gives us the strength to serve him and to prevail. As our sages in the Talmud said, if God would not assist, then a person could not overcome the selfish inclination. Nevertheless, God still has pleasure and pride as if we had done everything ourselves. However, true service of God is achieved only when we motivate ourselves. Okay, so you got the parable. Let's unpack it.
Who's the last line? It's just really, it's too much of a twist. Because
The whole thing is about the father's feeding it there.
but the father fed him, and then he went ahead and mustered his own wisdom and resolved all.
For the next question. There was question 1.
Yeah.
Father's Cliff's Notes cover that. This visitor is like, hey, the father's really having a lot of pride.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask new questions, harder questions, and they wasn't prepared for the harder questions. So the father's like, oh no. But the son stepped up, he used his own and got it right. So let's unpack the parable.
But then the next to last paragraph says that whoever is not stepping up, but God likes that anyway. And then it turns around and
Right.
goes, yeah.
So let's unpack it. Who's the parent in the parable? In the analog, it's God, right? Who's the child represent? Us. Who's the tester? Life or life, and I'd say also maybe even actually more specific, God implants into us a tester. The Yetzer Hara is meant to test you. I mean, it's life is like the externals, and the Yetzer Hara is the voice that tests you, that makes it harder for you to pick the right answer, right? To challenge you. Okay, what's the goal in here? It's the kid to get the questions right, to pass the test. So the goal, God wants us to pass our life test and overcome the challenges by the Yetzer Hara. Okay, the first question, what did that represent? In my own words, that's where God lobs us a softball. The black and white scenarios of life. Of course, you know what to do. God gave you parents that told you this is right or wrong. You pick the right one. You have the Cliff's Notes of this life scenario. You pick the right answer. You make the right choice. Okay, I call that the first set of questions is the black and white scenarios of life that are easier to solve. What's the second set of questions? I'd say those are the gray areas of life, the ones that aren't your parents and your rabbi and your coach didn't tell you exactly what to do in this scenario. And it takes a lot more reflection, navigation, advice, seeking, and stuff like that. And that's the second set. So exactly your point, Garrett. The first set of questions, the first set of challenges of life that come with your Yetzer Hara, especially telling you, you always have a voice telling you pick the selfish option, even if it's an easy moral dilemma. But those we do, and it was like God kind of, like I say, lobbed you a softball. It's like God, you know what to do. He gave you the wisdom through your parents, through your just societal etiquette, and you know what to do. And even so, God gives you the credit because you did something. You showed up, you showed up, and you answered the right question. Okay, but then the harder questions, signified by the parable's second questions, those you really get credit for because those were really subtle and really gray and really took perseverance. So that's why I'm saying both. Okay, so that's a little summary, a little philosophical discussion about free choice, the way we look at free choice according to Torah Judaism, that free choice is something that is unique to the human being. And when we do it, sometimes it's easier. We still get some credit. And for sure, when it's really hard, we really get a lot of credit. God takes a lot of pride of us making the right choice with real gray, hazy area of free choice. Let's take that idea of a free choice into the free choice to be a Jew in America. That started really with American Judaism. So learning exercise number 3. Should give an expression. The Talmud says a person would rather have one measure of his own than 9 measures of someone else's. Because again, we approve. Oh, my God. Okay. Sorry. So learning exercise 3. There are many organizations, synagogues within each Jewish community, each focused on its individual mission, and sometimes in direct competition with one another. In what ways has this been a positive development for the Jewish community? In what ways has this been a negative development for the Jewish community? So the fact that American Judaism, they say, okay, you don't like that synagogue, make your own synagogue. You don't like that synagogue, make your own synagogue. You don't like that school, make your own school. You don't like that butcher, make your own butcher. You don't like that kosher division? Okay, so let's talk about what are some of the negatives that this wasn't this plethora of choices that exist in European communities. There was much more controlled. So what's the negatives and what are perhaps some of the positives you could think of? Anyone wants to share a negative?
Well, you get divisions within the community.
Division, just anybody can keep in divisiveness and no one can stop them. All in the name of freedom of religion. Okay, what's some of are there any positives though, now that we have such a splintered, multi organization in the community?
Just need these first. These will let me.
Such as?
It's this almost every university, right? But there's Jews everywhere, go anywhere. It's like in this country, for instance, the Jewish sort of community.
So you're saying there became a
Operation.
proliferation,
Uh,
Jewish centers,
yeah, well, or
Jewish life institution.
probably in the United States, and more influence over the world, probably any other time was any
Well, you're talking about Jews having opportunity to, find their, have prosperity. I'm talking about Jewish life as far as I'm saying, about as far as Jewish community.
So just like one little example, like how it starts from the Jewish community in New York, and that's to play, and how you put your Jewish play. But that doesn't happen if you had
One synagogue.
one synagogue. This
Mhm.
Jewish here.
So saying the ability to really have that flexibility in making new institutions helped Jewish prosperity spread
and
and
like
expression, right?
In competition. Competition, if I'm not happy with my shul, what's the case, by the way, I come to the Chabad, and I may get better experience, and that's.
otherwise you'd be just not be Jewish. Very
Or you say, I don't, right, or
express Jewish.
right, exactly. Okay, I hear you. So there's basically so much to summarize. You're saying in my own words, multiple options helps proliferate Jewish land footprint all over expression all over. It's one, and two, it's what do you call it? Competition for better products. Okay, give a little just to summarize to finish this idea. This is from the Rebbe, and this is a very general idea. You find this many places. This is from a talk in 1958, and as follows. When God provides us with spiritual growth as a gift, there's no limit to what we can achieve. Whereas when we achieve spiritual growth through our own efforts, our progress ends up being constrained. I'm sorry. Whereas when we achieve spiritual growth through our own efforts, our progress ends up being constrained and circumscribed by our inherent human limitations. Nevertheless, there's an advantage in serving God through our own efforts, since the growth that we experience becomes fully integrated within us. When God is the primary actor in our spiritual advancement, we lack the ability to completely absorb the gift that we are being given because it's being generated in a manner that is more intense than we are ready for. Like the Jews in the desert, right? They got these miracles, and they complain. Like, how are you complaining? Like God, like showed himself to you by the Red Sea, and Mount Sinai. Why is this a discussion anymore? Because they didn't really absorb it. They didn't integrate it to them as a person. It's like it blew their mind. And now, like, okay, I saw something, but it didn't change me. But when we really serve God, kind of from our own measly, puny, attempts to connect, there's a certain beauty that we're changing ourselves and readying ourselves for that connection, even if it's a lesser intensity. This is not the case of the service of God that begins from our own effort. The spiritual advancement results always internalized, becomes completely integrated with our lives. So this is a very important idea about another reason why free choice, you choosing, not being born into Anatevka, but choosing to belong to the Jewish community is so powerful, because it's not like, okay, yeah, Anatevka or whatever the communities, they lived a much richer Jewish lives than us on average. The average Jew had more Jewish knowledge, more Jewish practice, more Jewish friends, Jewish spouses, Jewish, country clubs, whatever they did. And here you have much less of that. At the same time, when we do choose, it's a little more real because we're owning him. We're the initiator, and that really makes us a much more personal type of investment.
There's a story through.
Ruth, yeah, I mean that's anything, yeah. She converted with a great hardship. So, in summary, the past that represents kind of top-down. God just gifted Jews with Judaism, like be Jewish, the shtetl. You don't have a choice anyway, so you might as well live it up and enjoy it. So that's very much God just through the mechanism of the world, but just giving a Jewish kid a pretty certain trajectory of Jewish life and enjoyment of it. Present, you don't have that natural trajectory. At the same time, you have to choose, and the little you choose, each choice is much more. It's more precious to us. It's much more integrated into us. And as we said earlier, that's what God wants with free choice, right? That it should be much more. The more it's coming from your initiative, with the less external prompts, it's more precious to God. So that's the pro of choice. The con is people struggle. People make bad choices. They opt out. They take some years to come around, or another lifetime. So that's as far as the power of free choice. Free will choice gives us the ability to establish a truer connection to get with God. And now here's the thing. Okay. Text 15. This is just a practical tool. So we said, we explained the beauty of free choice in the community today that we have, and that it's much more integrated. We have a lesser quantitative Jewish life, but it's much, in a sense, the little that we do, and we should always do a little more, and always grow in doing a little more. But every little bit we do is definitely more initiative taken. It's much more coming from our initiative, and it's much more integrated into who we are on a deeper level. Not we're just born into it and external, prompted into it. So the reality is there's a big risk, though. There's a big risk of you might fumble and stumble for decades till you grow in your Judaism, or you can find it in a way that's really in accordance with God's plan for you. It take you a long time. People opt out and then come back to it later on. So how do we make choices? We're trying to do the right thing. How do we know we're doing the right thing? Maybe we're doing the selfish thing. The term for this inner, the thing of Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov, like the little devil and the little angel, whatever, the internal voice, the good conscience, the bad conscience. So that's a basic Jewish paradigm that every person has that. And Tanya calls it animal soul and godly soul, selfish and selfish. But it's all the same kind of internal voices. Remember, if the animal soul, as an example, it's not like this dumb, like me want food. It's not like it's not this very like crude, crass voice that you can, oh yeah, that's coming from the animal soul. Be very sophisticated. In the words of one of the Rebbe's says, the animal soul could be the slyest of animals, be the fox, known as the sly of animals, who can smooth talk you. You're doing this for the right reason. You're doing this for a holy reason. And really, it's just the selfish, couched, drive telling you to do something. So how do you know? How do you know what's a way to navigate? So we want the beauty of free choice. We want the beauty of it to like initiative, personal, us choosing, us opting in, and God loves that type of that type of initiative and choice. But there's a lot of danger. How do we mitigate the risks involved? So this is a Mishnah from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, Aseh L'cha Rav. One of the rabbis, I forget what it was, said, establish a mentor for yourself. Making a mentor, we can call a life coach today, but a Jewish life coach, or particularly I'm saying a life coach in your Jewish journey, a mentor is a very important thing, because it doesn't mean you become a bobblehead to listen to somebody. It means you still have your own thoughts and feelings and things you got to work out. But the one thing you can't do is impartiality. A person never is impartial to themselves. So the rabbis said a person should always choose a mentor to help get rid of that, that bias you have towards yourself, and to talk it over with a third party, a second party, who can help you see where you're missing, having a blind spot, or where you think you're being good, really you're being selfish, and all that. So this thing of having a mentor is a very important part of Judaism. Just some practical tips of how to find a mentor. The mentor doesn't have to be a rabbi, it doesn't have to be, some certified life. It could be anybody you look up to that has more, I'd say, life wisdom and Jewish wisdom, a little bit. This would be some great scholar, just someone you look up to, someone who you feel can give you good advice, Jewishly and life. That's one. Two, how do you find such a person? The person shouldn't be judgmental. Be another thing. And number three, the person should be able to keep confidentiality, obviously. Okay. The Rebbe, by the way, before he passed away, the last few years of his life was storming that everybody should choose a mentor in the Chabad community. Choose a mentor. In Hebrew, it's called a mashpia. Choose a personal mentor. And she said, we want you can be our mentor, Rebbe. Used to, like, he's like, I'm not going to be here forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Rebbe didn't say that, but like he was trying to set a post to Rebbe, post to Rebbe's life. How can Chabad go on? He felt a very big part of it was everybody has to pick a personal mentor. Again, a little ahead of you, you feel you want to learn from them, but and the Rebbe is going to, and God will work through that person. It's an amazing thing when you hit quandary. Now we're going to quote text 16, another saying of Pirkei Avot from Hillel. He would say, "Im ein anili, if I'm not for myself, mili, who is going to be for me? Ukshani latzmi, and if I'm only for myself, what am I? Lo ani. If not now, then when?" So it's thing to note that if I'm not for myself, it's all about you got to take initiative for yourself. You got to take initiative for yourself. That's what God's waiting for. By the way, and you can't only be for yourself. You know Aleph, teach Aleph. You have to always help others as well. And this is the call of the hour. We have to take initiative. If not for me, if I'm not for my own journey, and fill my own purpose, who's going to fill that purpose for me? And also, I got to worry about others as well. So, a quick question for discussion: do you have a Jewish mentor? And number two, are you mentoring? Do you kind of have someone informally that you're mentoring? And this is two very important things to think of. These are incredible tools, both to look for a mentor and to, someone you can be open with about ups and downs and questions in personal life and crossroads, but also be available to mentor somebody else. And that, under the key points. Before the key points, there's some really good. The appendix has fantastic stuff, and the end of the appendix is the additional readings, kind of more of a historical details of the freedom change Jewish community.
Key points. Lesson 3. 1. There were significant benefits that Jews experienced when they lived in tight-knit Jewish communities with strong centralized authority. 2. The modern world's focus on individualism and doing things my way has eroded Jewish communal authority. 3. Because there is no top-down structure within the Jewish community today, unity is developed through grassroots efforts. 4. Because there is currently no official Jewish community, every individual can choose to participate in the existing community, opt out of the community, or start a new Jewish community of like-minded people. 5. Human beings are made in the divine image. Our power of free choice is grounded in God's unconstrained ability to make free-willed choices. 6. God provides us with guidance in the form of the Torah and the strength to overcome our selfish tendencies. Each time we choose to do good, God considers it as if we had achieved success all on our own. 7. The medieval Jewish world provided Jews with very few options, whereas today we have an unparalleled degree of freedom. Every time we choose to act in a Jewish manner, it displays a remarkable degree of commitment and loyalty to God and to our Jewish identity. 8. In an era where no Jewish authority is imposed upon any individual, it is our responsibility to establish a mentor for ourselves and to be a mentor to others.
Okay. So that summarizes finishes tonight's class. And we'll see you next week for the final class. There's actually 6 lessons. We're only doing 4. 4 of them. And we will get to that next week. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
See you.
Thank you.